All right, it's time for week 8, which is tiny V victories. So you can see that we have the little V's that are created. We use 2 colors, and the 2 colors will be B and C. And it's a bit of like stranded knitting. And so I'm going to show you some tips for working this row. There are 59 rows here, and you start with 5, 5, 5, then you go to 4, 4, and then it decreases. So when you're working the pattern, know that you are changing the plain rounds that are in between the V, the victory round. So let's take a look at some simple ways to do this. This week's pattern is really a form of stranded knitting. It's actually really a nice one to practice on. And it's simple, it's 3 and then 1. Couple of confessions here. I used the wrong color last week. And this dark green was to be this week. So, not a major problem. And if that happens to you, you can simply look at your yarn that you have, and you can see that, yes, this skein is pretty large compared to this skein. So I simply switched the color around. I think they were B and C, so I made C, B, and so forth. So you can make adjustments. Next week when we take a look at the pattern, there's some little strands like this, and you should have enough yarn that you could make some changes on the amount of color that you use there. One of the things I've talked about with stranded knitting is that Continental sometimes makes this really easy. So I want to show you again how I Continental knit with 2 yarns. You absolutely can use one, drop, pick up the other one, or carry them in either hand. But this might be a nice pattern that you would be able to say, I want to try this. I want to practice this. Now, be careful with that because it can change your tension a bit. But I thought this is a good opportunity to show Continental knitting because many people like to know what Continental knitting is and or how to do it. It's kind of good to know both ways, Continental and English or throwing. So to Continental, you tension your yarn in your left hand and you wrap it around your pinky. And when I'm teaching Continental knitting, I will often talk about scooping it towards you so that it goes all the way around the pinky. It goes under the 2 middle fingers and up and over so that it shuttles off of your index finger. So let me show you that again. You wrap it towards you. So in other words, you wouldn't want to go like this without it being wrapped around your pinky because you've got to have some tension. This doesn't have any tension. So again, you scoop that towards you around your pinky, under the 2 middle fingers and over. And the closer the better. So you can see that I don't have what I call a tall finger here. A lot of Continental knitters or beginners will have this tall, and then again, you can't maintain the tension. Now, when you're working with the 2 yarns, the yellow yarn is the color work basically. And so I want the color work closest to me, or I often say closest to my heart. And so you can see that it's like writing to the left. And so then you could go and pick up each of these strands as you knit, but there's another way that you can separate them out. They're not really very separate, so that would be difficult. So what we do is we tension all the way around that pinky. Then you, instead of under 2, you take your middle finger and you split the 2, and then you see where we get extra space to be able then to knit Continental. And Continental is sometimes called picking. So this is an example of it. You go up and over and pick that yarn off of your index finger. And then you pick, I've done 3, so then you do your 4th one that way. So I'm still in position. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this you can do all the way across. It allows it to flow very quickly, easily. Other thing you want to do is don't forget to give these just a little bit of a stretch so that your float is not getting too tight. And then I'm going to move on and I'm going to be able to do it again. So you can see the space between those yarns that allow me to go over there and pick that up. Then at some point you'll probably drop and you'll retension, put your middle finger in the beginning and keep it tight. So sometimes people start down here, but it's hard to move up the yarn. So I always start my tension as close to the work as possible, because then I can pull it down versus trying to work it back up. And then that keeps it nice and tight, and we're ready to go again on working your stranded Continental. As I said before, if you prefer to just drop and pick up, that works too. If you prefer to carry one yarn over in your right hand and flick that way, that works too. This is just an opportunity, nice little pattern that if you wanted to try Continental stranded knitting, carrying it in your left hand, this would be a good opportunity for you to give it a try. I'm at the end of round 23, which is where we introduce the color work. And so now I will knit 4 rounds just plain. And so one thing I often get asked is, do you carry the yarn up? Absolutely. I do not cut this yarn at any point in this segment. And one of the things you can do is you can bring your working yarn. So my next yarn that I will knit with will be this rust color, up and underneath that gold yarn. And then that traps that yellow yarn a bit as you continue to work up. These are only like 4 rows, 5 rows, 4 rows. I think it goes then to maybe 3 or 2. And so it's not super imperative that you trap that every time that you go up, but you certainly can. You just want to be careful not to get too tight, because then you could cinch that up and it could have kind of an effect here in this segment. So that's kind of an option. At this point, I'm down to 4 rows, then I go on down. And so I probably won't be trapping. I trap it on that first one. I'll knit 4 more rows and then do another color row segment. Here is my completed Tiny V for Victory section. I like how it turned out. Looks nice. I hope you enjoyed possibly practicing, how you want to do it. It's a nice way to do some stranded knitting without dealing with a lot of different colors. So we have 2 more weeks to go. This is next week. And it too is like stranded knitting. So you have some plain knitting, and then you have 3 rows where you will do some stranded knitting that creates these V's. Super neat looking. You'll use 3 colors. It's about the same length. And then we have 1 more week to finish. So you'll be able to use your lightest color most likely, and then your other 2 colors. And now you're getting to the end of the project where you could look at what yarn you have left and make an assessment if you want to change out some colors, because you have a good idea of where you're at with your yarn usage. Let's continue our walk through our previous HusKAL projects. This was our 3rd 2017, and we had 36 participants, and it was a really big knit. It is a Casapinka shawl pattern, but it was fun because it had some increasing and decreasing to create kind of a angled look. It had some lace. We used Jessica. This is the first time that Jessica helped us dye some yarn to make this project. We used her yarn, and we used a combination of BA yarn. We had just introduced BA yarn. You can see that there were some really fun kind of segments in this, along with some lace and just some plain knitting as well. But it was a big knit. It was 4 full skeins of fingering weight yarn. So that's approximately 1,200 yards. And I remember Jessica and I winding this yarn. That's when the shop was located, in my basement. Winding this yarn and having difficulty getting all of these skeins wound. And to think we did that for 38 and now we do 130. So I guess it was a good start, and it was a nice way to involve Jessica in our project. So that was 2017. Then 2018 was when we moved into doing the design ourselves. So this was the first year that I asked staff if they would like to contribute a pattern. And this is a stranded knit. So it's kind of similar to what we're doing this year. And it's knit in a tube. This yarn is prairie spun, DK prairie spun from brown sheep. So that was fun to have that be a Nebraska yarn, and we had 51 participants. So we're starting to jump up. I have had folks tell me that this is one of their favorites. Might have to be something we'll repeat, but staff then contributed. So they designed these patterns, and then we kind of had a brainstorming session and laid them out to see how long they needed to be, and in order to make a good length. But aren't these just beautiful, all of these patterns? To make sure that we had the right length for our scarf. Let's turn it around. And then we have huskers on the end. And then we had some fringing that we did as well. This pattern is not retired. The others, we don't really have the source to put the yarn together, but we can put this one together with the brown sheep yarn. And this was still when we were doing strictly huskers, so strictly husker colors. Did have some folks modify it and do some other teams in their huskers, or they maybe changed their in. This was done for everyone. So I had a lot of people make it for maybe their dad or a boyfriend or their daughter. It was one that was really well received. So I think it looks like something that we should consider doing again, so that we have a matching, not maybe a matching, but a complementary scarf. So that was our first, that was our 2018. And next week we'll look at 19 and 20 as we continue to walk down our memories of our previous HusKALs.